Hello everyone, welcome to JS Kicks and my name is Deepak. You may be wondering why Deepak has not been posting anything on their YouTube channel, JS Kicks precisely, right? So here I'm going to be making some announcement, and also I'm going to be telling you that why I was away from YouTube for a while, and also tell you something that I'm super excited to share with you all. Firstly, in the last few months, I've been upgrading myself to AI and new latest technologies. I've also been learning Python side by side, and I was also wondering what I could bring, what I could actually build at the same time using the AI knowledge that I have been gaining, right? So I came up with this idea that I wanted to share with you, which I'm actually very excited about. Imagine an application that not only helps you learn English, but also listens, corrects, and guides you like a real coach. Today I'm announcing my project that I've been working for a while. It's an AI powered English learning app, and I'll also give you a quick peek into what I'm building and how it looks behind the scene. But before that, I would want to also explain and tell you the motivation behind it. Growing up, I studied and grew up in an environment where English was not really the primary or the first language for me. So while I grew up, it took a little while for me to actually gain the knowledge of English and start speaking and start conversing with multiple people in this language, right? So I understand the pain, and I also understand the journey a person has to go through in order to learn English and to practice and become good at it. So this is actually the so I do not want to waste your time, and I just want to give you a quick summary as to what exactly I've been building and how it is going to be looking exactly. So, and on my screen you can see that I have opened eraser.io. If you guys have not been using this, I would suggest you to at least try it once. It's actually pretty good for inception and drawing out your initial diagrams and things like that. Right. So the project that I've been working on is called, and this is gonna be powered by API. I'll quickly give you a gist of what I've been building in the last few weeks. So before I begin, I would want to divide this screen into two, right? So let me just draw a line over here, and the one side I'm going to be keeping user. So this is something a user would see, and what I'm doing exactly is actually I'm building an mobile application. So this is the mobile application I'm going to be building. I'm actually building this in React Native, right? So let me expand this a little bit. So user would essentially interact with this application, right? And this application would do a lot of things in the background, and that's what I'm going to be explaining you. But before that, I also want to explain you, how the cloud infrastructure for this particular app looks like. So this application, whenever user interacts with it, what I've done is I've used GPT-4 APIs or GPT 3.5 APIs to do the translation and to the suggestion. So this application is going to be interacting with the API gateway. So basically I've deployed this entire application in AWS, right? So this entire backend infrastructure is being built in the AWS, right? So I'm just going to be keeping it here. And this AWS infrastructure is basically your application is going to be interacting. The first entry point is going to be basically the AWS API gateway. So this is your gateway over here, which would sit between the user and your backend infrastructure, right? So let's just put this arrow like this, or let me arrange it a little bit better, right? So say all right, so now you can understand that the user is going to be basically interacting with the React Native application that would in turn talk to the API gateway through HTTP protocol. And then I've written a few APIs in Python, and that's what I'm going to be explaining, how exactly I have deployed these. So I'm going to be basically using 3 GitHub repositories, right? So what are those? So 3 GitHub repositories are precisely for my React Native application code. Okay. So I'm not essentially using the same repository mono repo, so to say. This application is basically coming from here, right? So this is then going to be going on to the Play Store and App Store. So currently in the first draft, I'm going to be putting that in the App Store, and in the second draft, I'm going to be putting that in the Google Play Store, right? And the code for these, these two platforms would reside here on the GitHub. And that particular, I think I should put it like this. Right. And then user is basically going to be taking a copy of this application from either the Play Store or the GitHub store, right? So I'm just going to be putting it like this. All right. So far we have only spoken about how the UI application or how the mobile application would be taken up from the Play Store and App Store. Now I'm going to be talking about the backend infrastructure. So that as I've already defined that the application would make basically an HTTP call in order to talk to the backend or the logic that I've written in the backend using Python. And the interface is going to be, firstly, the application is going to be facing the API gateway, right? Also, let me write it down here, right, so that it is clear for you to as to how this would really go, right? So this is the API gateway. Next, once the API gateway receives a request from user's cell phone, it is basically going to be talking to the load balancer. Let me put this here, right? So load balancer, right? And from here, it's basically going to be actually calling the API which I have hosted in the EC2, right? So load balancer is essentially going to be managing my EC2s. So EC2s are Elastic Compute Cloud, also known as the server essentially, right? So let me put the EC2 over here. And this load balancer is particularly will be having responsibility to talk to my EC2 and call the respective APIs, right? And mapping of those would be given in the API gateway, right? So this is how essentially the traffic would be flown from my application to these, right? I think I can put it like this, right? All right. So now we have defined exactly how it would look. So far only I have spoken about one repository in which the React Native code would reside. But essentially, I'm going to be having 3 repositories, as I said, right? So the other 2 repositories, the one repository will have the code, the Python code or the backend code which is written. And this particular backend code would then be basically maintained by Terraform, right? So what is Terraform? I'll just quickly give you a gist of what exactly Terraform is all about. Let me put it here. So Terraform is it's a product from HashiCorp, and this particular Terraform is responsible to spin up this particular AWS infrastructure code. And this infrastructure code is managed and run by Terraform, and this Terraform is basically going to be sitting inside one of the repository. So whenever like in current case, what I do is like I have the AWS CLI, and in that AWS CLI I manage to call the EC2 and I spin up my infrastructure for dev and prod environment. I'm currently keeping 2 environments precisely, right? And this Terraform is then going to be responsible to spin up this entire infrastructure. So let me draw this infrastructure here. So you can see this entire thing is driven or is managed by the Terraform, right? You can see here. So this, let me draw another one. So this Terraform is actually responsible to spin up this particular infrastructure, and at the same time checking out the code in the EC2 and run it, right? And all of that is basically going to be done in the backend. Entire code is written in Python, right? So it's here and it's here, right? So it's or rather I'll do it like this, right? So this is your GitHub. The Terraform application is here. So this Terraform resides here and then it runs. And this particular repository is going to be basically holding the infrastructure code. And the other repository you see is going to be holding the Python code. And this particular Python code will be basically checked out by this EC2, right, at the runtime. It will basically check this out and run this and spin up and then open the endpoints to load balancer and API gateway, right? So that's how it would be. All of it is basically under a VPC, right? So let me just put a AWS VPC as well. So VPC is a virtual private cloud. Let me put it here. So this virtual private cloud, or VPC as they call it, is basically responsible to keep everything under a cloud or under one name or under one application domain, and only public access is allowed through this API gateway. Otherwise, you would not be able to basically access these hosted EC2 anywhere on the HTTP protocol. However, I have actually allowed my personal CLI to access this EC2, and that's what essentially I do, just to check the logs and as to how it is really happening. I just want to see like how it performs in the backend, and that's why I have kept it like this, right? So this is going to be the VPC. So I think, this is how it is. And in that Python code, you would actually find that I've written the LangGraph logic. So this LangGraph logic is basically written and kept here, and then will be used inside the EC2. So you can see this here, just properly backend code, and backend code is basically responsible to run or to keep Python backend plus LangGraph, right? And I'm going to be making use of the GPT APIs. So this is the overall bird eye view of the infrastructure, how it is going to be looking like. I'm not really going in detail. I just want to give you a gist as to what I was building and why I was away from YouTube for a short while. I forgot to tell you something that the authentication of this is going to be basically done by the Firebase. So this Firebase is responsible for the authentication and authorization. So let me put it this way, auth, right? So let me just save this here. All right, and once this auth is done, the EC2 basically calls up this Firebase service to basically receive the token and to validate if the user is allowed to actually log in or access the resources which are kept here on the AWS. So thank you very much for listening in, and stay tuned, and I'll give you an announcement whenever I launch that particular application. But until then, you can expect that I'll take you into the journey of making one such application yourself, from React Native to writing a full backend code and keeping the infrastructure code in GitHub, and then maintaining it with Terraform, and then also how you can do that, the LangChain thing, and then how you can do that in Python, and how you can spin up the entire AWS infrastructure using all of the different components that I've just spoken to you about, right? So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for listening in. I'm going to be seeing you pretty soon. Once I launch my application, I'll be back and I'll tell you the full length of my experience. So thank you once again. And if you have not really subscribed to my channel, I would request you to please do so, because it takes a immense amount of effort to basically build such thing and then tell you all for free, right? So the least you could do is to actually subscribe to my channel, and that'll be a positive encouragement for me. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to be seeing you in the next one pretty soon. Thank you.